What is the most controversial scientific discovery ever? Story 1: the first public hearing on unidentified flying objects, UFOs, that Congress has held since the 1960s was in May, during which 144 sightings of strange objects were discussed. At the hearings, two high ranking military officers were interrogated regarding their familiarity with the mysterious occurrence. Three military witnesses testified at separate hearings in July and May, claiming that proof of non human technology was being withheld from the general public. According to all three eyewitnesses, aliens may be launching UAPs to spy on American skies, test the effectiveness of our air defense systems, or get insight into our nuclear capabilities. Story 2: the revelation of two alien bodies by a journalist in September before Mexico's Congress brought its own set of extraterrestrial problems. The journalist Jaime Maussan and a military doctor asserted that the remains were not human, but not alien, based on DNA testing. A group of scientists banded together to disprove and disprove these assertions. Over 50 anomalous metal spheres discovered in the Pacific Ocean this year were allegedly created by intelligent extraterrestrials, according to a renowned Harvard astrophysicist. According to Avi Loeb, the small particles most likely plummeted into the water in 2014 after a meteor soared over Papua New Guinea. A spacecraft from another solar system, the flaming object may contain artifacts of extraterrestrial technology, according to Loeb. Several studies conducted in November came to the conclusion that the metal spheres are most likely a result of coal combustion and so likely originate from industrial pollution on our planet. In a blog post published on November 15th, Loeb disputed these findings. The coal, he claimed, is not magnetic. Therefore, the equipment he used to retrieve the pellets from the water couldn't have picked them up. He warned scientists not to jump to conclusions before fully analyzing the samples, pointing out that 93% of them had not been tested yet. Story 3: in March, researchers speculated that Tasmanian tigers Thylacynus cynocephalus may still be roaming the Tasmanian wilderness today, based on sightings documented from 1910. They said that the tigers lived in the wild until the 1980s. The last known Tasmanian tiger died in captivity in 1936, leading many to believe that these marsupials had gone extinct. However, experts have recently determined that the earliest possible date for extinction, assuming the species did indeed go extinct, would be in the mid-1950s. Since the results relied entirely on eyewitness accounts of Tasmanian tigers, many were skeptical of the study. Due to the striking similarities between Tasmanian tigers and dogs, any sightings reported could have been mistaken, and scientists informed Live Science that no evidence of the species' survival in the wild has ever been discovered. Story 4: a group of European paleontologists came under fire for publishing a paper using fossils of 115-million-year-old dinosaurs that had been found by commercial diggers in Brazil and subsequently transported to Germany. The latest study implies that the remains belong to the carnivorous irritator Chalengeri species, which is linked to Spinosaurus and may have scooped up prey like a pelican. The authors of the study mistakenly believed that the fossils belonged to Germany since they had arrived there prior to 1990, the year in which Brazil started limiting the export of scientific goods. The fossils may have been taken because they are Brazilian government property and cannot be sold, according to an older statute from 1942. All the paleontologists who worked on the project, including the authors, thought the bones belonged back in Brazil. This is one of those thorny crossroads where science, ethics, and international law all collide, and it's messy. On one hand, the discovery itself is thrilling. Irritator Chalengeri, with its pelican-like snout, offers fascinating clues about Spinosaur behavior and evolution. That kind of find deserves attention and study. But how those fossils were obtained, and where they rightfully belong, matters just as much as the science. Story 5: South Korean researchers made headlines last summer after claiming to have created a superconductor at ambient temperature and pressure, prompting a rush of imitators. If confirmed, new avenues of technological exploration would be unlocked by the identification of a material that can conduct electricity at room temperature and without electrical resistance. Other experts, however, voiced concerns that the published study lacked proper peer review and was shoddy. No matter how many different materials they tested, none of them were able to match the performance of the South Korean team's superconductor LK-99. Later, more widely publicized efforts have likewise failed. The announcement sparked lively debates on social media and beyond over a field of research that the average person is unfamiliar with, regardless of the result for LK-99. Story 6. The partial remains of two of our ancient cousins, Australopithecus sediba and Homo naledi, were aboard a Virgin Galactic space trip that took off from Earth. This cargo was both priceless and exceedingly disputed. Timothy Nash, a billionaire from South Africa, caused a stir in the scientific world when he transported hominin fossils to the edge of space in a cigar-shaped tube. The South African Heritage Resources Agency authorized the flight of the fossils with the stated purpose of bringing international attention to South African study into human origins and advancing scientific knowledge. Due to the lack of a scientific aim and the fact that the fossils could have been destroyed in the event of a malfunction, experts criticized the initiative. Detractors said the expedition tarnished the reputation of paleoanthropology and brought up ethical concerns about the proper treatment of human ancestors' burial sites. Story 7. Experts criticized the approach and accused the authors of cherry-picking data for a study that suggested the ozone hole above Antarctica is not recovering as quickly as previously thought and could be growing larger. According to experts interviewed by Live Science, the conclusion that the concentration of ozone at the center of Antarctica's ozone hole decreased by 26% from 2001 to 2022 failed to take into account various factors that could have explained the unusual weather patterns in recent years. These factors included 3 years of La Niña from 2020 to 2022, massive wildfires in Australia in 2020, and water vapor from Tonga's massive eruption in 2022. Additionally, experts raised concerns about the author's choice to omit data from 2 years, claiming that this would have biased the findings. Experts agreed that the results were too optimistic to draw any firm conclusions regarding the future of ozone recovery on a global scale. Story 8, Hominins, which include humans, African apes, and their fossil ancestors, and differ from hominins, which comprise species belonging to the human lineage after it diverged from the ancestors of chimpanzees and bonobos, were thought to have originally evolved in Europe, according to a recently discovered ape fossil from a site in Turkey that dates back 8.7 million years. This contradicts the widely held belief that hominins came from Africa alone and instead implies that some of this group spread to Africa from the Mediterranean. However, paleontologists have pointed out that this hypothesis is not supported by detailed analysis of relative fossils from big apes and early humans. Experts told Live Science that it's probable the new species Anadaluvius turcae evolved in Africa and then traveled to the Mediterranean instead of the other way around. Although the lack of these kinds of fossils in the African fossil record does not rule out the presence of hominines, it does call into question the initial evolutionary hotspots of the group, they went on to say. This discovery shakes the evolutionary tree, and it's exactly the kind of scientific disruption that makes paleoanthropology so fascinating. For decades, Africa has been considered the unquestioned cradle of humanity. The idea that hominins might have evolved in Europe before migrating to Africa challenges one of the cornerstones of human origin theories. But science thrives on challenges. One fossil find doesn't rewrite history, it opens a new chapter for deeper inquiry. Story 9. While AI does have many useful uses and advantages, it also has several major downsides. Consider two prominent AI systems, deepfake and Neuralink, which may have some useful applications but also some serious problems. Deepfakes, a kind of face-swapping technology, are surely familiar to you. They're used to revive actors and actresses who have passed away, but they can also make world leaders seem to say things they never said, or even more inappropriate things. However, Neuralink may be unfamiliar to you. It's an initiative by Elon Musk to develop technology that will enhance brain-machine interfaces, record memories, and accomplish other brain-related feats. The ethics of using artificial intelligence to improve human brain function and of linking human brains to machines are major concerns, with a primary focus on Neuralink. Concerns about ethics center on the creation of this technology and any negative consequences it may have. Extensive testing will be necessary to achieve the company's goal of optimizing human brain function. The ultimate result will be experiments on human brains, the effects of which are still unclear. What point does the possibility of human loss with technical development outweigh the promise of drastic technological advancement? Story 10: The CRISPR system has allowed for the rapid and inexpensive editing of the human genome. Scientists are now able to manipulate gene expression and DNA sequences. That could lead to the creation of designer babies or the elimination of hereditary diseases. The Cas9 enzyme is used in the most well known type of CRISPR, an abbreviation for clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, a gene editing tool, comparable to molecular scrapbooking in essence. The discovery that bacteria build a library of virus DNA to defend themselves led to the invention of CRISPR technology, which destroys the DNA of foreign invaders before they can take over an organism. It wasn't long ago that a study showed how to use CRISPR for gene editing, marking the technique's emergence. Using CRISPR, Chinese researchers have begun creating designer babies, human embryos modified to withstand specific viruses. It would appear that all of this has the ability to enhance the standard of living for humans, but at what expense? We don't yet know what the long-term consequences will be, and it's impossible to predict how this will conclude. Designing a baby to be HIV resistant is one thing, but designing their unique personality and level of intelligence is something else different. Story 11: Among these fields of study, animal testing ranks among the most divisive. Some are strongly against it, while others couldn't care less. The development of more effective drugs and the testing of personal care items like shampoos, cosmetics, and toilet paper have both relied on animal research for quite some time. However, when it comes down to it, the ultimate goal of animal testing is to save human pain, not animal suffering. If animal experimentation may lead to better methods of disease prevention, for example, the moral rationale for it might be stronger. On the other hand, there are situations where the justification is more difficult to make, such as when improving lipstick probably isn't worth causing animals unnecessary pain. Suffering occurs in two forms, that of humans and that of animals. Furthermore, it appears that we do not mind when animals endure pain so long as it serves a higher purpose. Story 12: The creation of military weaponry is yet another area where scientific inquiry and moral considerations converge. Consider the Manhattan Project, which worked to create the atomic weapon during World War II. The studies performed throughout these experiments contributed significantly to our growing knowledge of quantum mechanics, atomic structure, and molecules. Another way to look at it is that hundreds of people died because of this research. Because people are fallible, there is a moral conundrum with military might and weapon technology. Bioweapons are extremely dangerous, and if we don't invest in them, only bad individuals with malicious intentions will be able to develop and manage them. Still, the moment someone develops weapons, it's too late to turn back the clock. Because of this, individuals who intend to cause damage could end up using them. This is one of the most sobering dilemmas in the intersection of science and ethics, the duality of discovery. The Manhattan Project is a perfect example. It brought together some of the greatest minds in physics and led to groundbreaking advances in atomic theory, but also resulted in devastation on a scale the world had never seen. It's the ultimate paradox: science advancing for the sake of knowledge and becoming a tool for destruction. Story 13: It may be time to think about relocating to Mars or some other planet as Earth appears to have seen better days. Mars may have water, according to scientists, and the red planet may have resources that could be useful for our survival. Therefore, instead of wasting that money, why not establish a colony on Mars? Considering the possibility of life on Mars, both now and in the future, raises the most significant ethical considerations about Martian colonization. Whether life could flourish on the planet is something we cannot say with perfect certainty. People could be hurt if they move there. Furthermore, programs to colonize Mars are expensive to develop. Surely that money should go towards helping Earth address some of its present environmental crises. Perhaps the best way for humans to fulfill their moral obligation to the planet is in answering these questions. Colonization appears pointless if we think our sole moral obligation is to the Earth. Space travel is a reasonable investment despite the high cost if you think we should consider all possibilities. Story 14: A solar eclipse is said to be the moment when pendulums or gravimeters act abnormally, a phenomenon known as the Allais effect. This phenomenon was initially documented by the French economist and polymath Maurice Allais, who would go on to win the Nobel Prize in Economics during the solar eclipse of June 30th, 1954, as an unusual precession of the plane of oscillation of a Foucault pendulum. 1. Using his paraconical pendulum, Allais documented yet another instance of the effect during the solar eclipse that occurred on October 2nd, 1959. In the French Astronautical Society's 1959 Halbert Prize and the U.S. Gravity Research Foundation's 1959 monograph on gravity was both bestowed upon him by this study. After more than half a century of observation, the scientific community is still divided regarding the Allais effect's validity, due to the fact that its testing has often produced contradictory or unclear results. Story 15. One of the things that kept the brilliant engineer and inventor Nikola Tesla going was his determination to find a way to use alternating current AC electricity. The current electrical grid and the idea of wireless communication were both ushered in by his inventions. Although Tesla's theories were known for their revolutionary potential and audacity, he frequently faced challenges in obtaining sufficient funding and acknowledgement for his endeavors. Thomas Edison, a famous inventor with a strong interest in direct current DC power, was on the opposite side of the ring. Among Edison's many notable inventions are the phonograph and the widely used electric light bulb. Concerned about the safety of AC electricity, he was vehemently against its acceptance and even went to extreme lengths like publicly electrocuting animals to prove his point. The War of the Currents, a struggle between the direct current DC electrical systems developed by Edison and the alternating current AC systems developed by Tesla, exemplified their rivalry and ultimately led to its demise. Electric current AC was unintentionally more efficient across longer distances than direct current DC, as demonstrated by the notorious public electrocution of animals that Edison conducted as part of his campaign to discredit AC. Story 16. Although the dangers of smoking have long been known, millions of people were led to believe otherwise when they were widely advertised as a harmless habit. In 1865, Washington Duke, on his 300-acre farm in Raleigh, North Carolina, USA, introduced the world to the first commercially sold cigarette. Upon the conclusion of the Civil War, he began selling his hand-rolled cigarettes to the soldiers. Research connecting smoking to lung cancer did not commence until the late 1940s and 1950s. For example, in 1949, epidemiologist Bradford Hill of the London School of Hygiene and researcher Richard Dahl of the Medical Research Council in Britain started studying lung cancer patients in hospitals around the city. A patient's medical history, food habits, and family medical history were all carefully questioned. Just 2 people out of 649 cases of lung cancer did not smoke. Dahl did the same thing, quitting his own habit of smoking 5 cigarettes a day. Story 17. Around 110 years ago, plastics were hailed as a technological marvel due to their remarkable combination of strength, flexibility, durability, and heat resistance. Plastic containers still predominate in the food industry, and healthcare facilities still rely on them for syringes and other sanitary supplies. The practically indestructible nature of plastics is both a strength and a weakness, contributing to their widespread use. Global production reached 15 million tons in 1964. In 2014, it reached 311 million tons, and experts predict that number will treble in the next 20 years. Due to its inability to biodegrade, the ever-degrading plastics, which account for around 1/3 of all plastic, leak harmful chemicals and devastate ecosystems instead of breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. While much remains to be accomplished in the fight against plastic, progress is being made. For example, in 2018, some UK-based corporations, including McDonald's, banned plastic straws and replaced them with paper ones. The rise of plastics is one of the clearest examples of a double-edged sword in modern science. Originally seen as a miracle material, strong, cheap, and versatile, plastic revolutionized healthcare, food safety, and manufacturing. And to be fair, it still saves lives daily, especially in sterile medical settings. But the very quality that made plastic so valuable, its durability, has become its curse. Story 18. In nuclear fission, the atomic nucleus divides into 2 or more lighter nuclei as a result of a nuclear reaction or radioactive decay. Even by the intense standards of radioactive decay, the fission process releases a tremendous amount of energy, frequently in the form of free neutrons and gamma rays. In December 17th, 1938, Otto Hahn and his helper Fritz Strassmann found nuclear fission of heavy materials. In January 1939, Lisa Meitner and her nephew Otto Robert Frisch provided a theoretical explanation. The United States launched a full-scale initiative to manufacture atomic weapons in the latter half of 1942. The Manhattan Engineer District, which was a part of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, assumed control of this project in 1943. We owe the development of the first nuclear weapons to the clandestine Manhattan Project. Many nations invested heavily in nuclear fission research and development in the decades following World War II, mostly for nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. In 1956, the first commercial nuclear power station was opened in the United Kingdom. There were a total of 437 reactors in 31 different nations by 2013. Story 19. As far as chemical explosives go, gunpowder is the first. Around the year 850 AD, Chinese alchemists were experimenting with elixirs that might lengthen life expectancy, but instead they found gunpowder. During the 10th and 11th centuries, the Chinese made extensive use of explosives. European armies swiftly adapted their use of cannons, flamethrowers, and grenades for use in land and maritime warfare. But the Europeans honed gunpowder's uses and built better gadgets that used it, creating weapons that changed the game completely. The invention of gunpowder changed the nature of combat globally, impacting the conduct of war and the establishment of borders during the Middle Ages. Almost all ammunition used in firearms worldwide is loaded with smokeless powder, although gunpowder and its modern equivalents do still have certain major uses today. The only exceptions to this rule are muzzleloaders and a small number of military cannons and artillery pieces. It takes a lot of time and money to make smokeless powder. Story 20. Eli Whitney came up with the idea for the cotton gin in 1793 and got a patent for it in 1794. This machine is far more efficient than hand separating cotton fibers from their seeds because it does it in a fraction of the time. The processed fibers can be turned into a variety of cotton goods, such as linens, while the undamaged cotton is mainly used for textiles, like clothes. As a result of the sudden and dramatic increase in demand for cotton workers, it unwittingly contributed to the expansion of slavery in the American South, despite its revolutionary impact on the cotton industry. Although the cotton gin made seed removal easier, it did little to alleviate the need for slaves to cultivate and harvest cotton. The planters' desire for land and slave labor skyrocketed as cotton production became an extremely lucrative endeavor. The number of slave states increased from 6 in 1790 to 15 in 1860. Southerners imported 80,000 Africans from 1790 to 1808, when Congress forbade the importing of slaves from Africa. Roughly one-third of Southerners were enslaved by 1860. Story 21. The era of the smartphone has arrived. Although the name smartphone didn't enter in use until 1995, the first practical smartphone was introduced in 1992, which is technically 3 years earlier. Developed by IBM almost 15 years prior to the iPhone's debut, it was known as the Simon Personal Communicator. Many people's mental health and wellness have begun to suffer as a result of their excessive smartphone use. For example, it is believed that smartphones can disrupt sleep and make face-to-face contact obsolete. Additionally, there is the expectation that one must always be online and connected, the equating of one's value to social media likes, and the potential detrimental effects of reading on smartphones on one's ability to learn and understand. Nowadays, people can't live without their phones. They use them for making and receiving calls, taking pictures, watching videos, shopping, keeping track of money, and a plethora of other functions. In that case, how would these portable computers evolve? Story 22, alternately known as heliocentrism, this theory challenges the long-established geocentric paradigm by proposing that Earth actually revolves around the Sun. As a result, heliocentrism was the subject of heated debate and, in extreme cases, persecution, since it ran counter to both scientific consensus and long-held religious and philosophical convictions. The debate over heliocentrism marked a watershed moment in history, when modern science began to question established beliefs and practices by presenting evidence-based arguments. When it was finally accepted, it signaled a change away from religious dogma and towards scientific inquiry based on observation and evidence. Our view of Earth's position in the cosmos was irrevocably altered by the heliocentrism debate, which ranks among the most consequential scientific disputes of all time. The heliocentrism debate wasn't just a turning point in astronomy, it was a revolution in human thought. Challenging geocentrism meant more than just moving the Earth from the center of the universe. It meant moving humans from the center of everything we thought we knew. That shook the foundations of religion, philosophy, and power structures that had gone unchallenged for centuries. Story 23, Natural Selection, Charles Darwin's Theory of Evolution, was met with fierce resistance by religious and non-religious organizations who saw it as at odds with their conception of creation. Regarding the implications of evolution for human beginnings and the role of chance in the creation of life, the dispute over evolution persists to this day.